10 most important events in U.S. gaming history. What made it possible for Vegas to grow into the gambling mecca that it has become? Robert Feiss, who was a prominent gaming attorney and history buff, suggested to history professors Michael Green and Gary Elliott that they should compile a list of the most important gambling events in United States gaming history. This would also legitimize Nevada history and start a conversation on the history of gambling. Michael Green and Gary Elliott put together a panel of gaming regulators, executives, and journalists to develop a list of recommendations. Green said, "This is sort of like Mays versus Mantle. You can sit on a bar stool and argue forever about it." Then, the two professors compiled a list from the panel's recommendations, and on June 9th, 1999, they presented their list at the second annual Gaming Business and Law Update Conference at the Bellagio, which is a conference for gaming attorneys. Number 1 on the list, the Bill of Rights. The most important event in gaming history was the Bill of Rights, which was proposed in 1789 and ratified in 1791. In the United States Constitution, the Bill of Rights says that each state can create their own laws as long as the law does not violate the U.S. Constitution, which is why gambling, prostitution, and marijuana are legal in some states. Gary Elliott said, "Gambling, to exist, must rely on liberty, autonomy of the people, and self-government." Number 2, Nevada repeals gambling ban. Gambling had been banned in Nevada in 1909, but after a 10-year debate, the state repealed the ban on March 19, 1931.
I do not gamble personally, but I do believe that gambling is an inherent trait in all normal men and women, and that it is far better to tear off the mask of hypocrisy and do in the open what we know is going on behind closed doors.
The professors said that this was not done because of the Depression. Nevada was not affected as much by the Depression as other states. The primary reason to repeal the ban on gambling was for the long-term benefit of the state because there were very few industries in Nevada at the time. On March 20th, 1931, the first gaming license went to Mame Stalker of the Northern Club on Fremont Street. The license cost $25 per month for each table game and $10 per month for each slot machine, and the fees were divided up between the state, county, and city or town. Currently, the oldest continuous gaming license is held by Railroad Pass Casino in Henderson, which has gaming license number 4. Number 3, federal support of transportation. Most of the country was a long drive from Las Vegas, and the Civil Aeronautics Act of 1938 regulated the airline industry and provided funds for airport construction that made it easier to take a plane ride to Vegas from all over the country. In 1958, the Federal Aviation Agency was created that would turn into the Federal Aviation Administration, or FAA. When the Flamingo was built in 1946, Flamingo Road was still a dirt road, and the drive from Southern California to Vegas was about 5 hours. And before 1969, more than half of all new vehicles did not have air conditioning. The Federal Highway Act of 1956 provided $25 billion in federal funds over 10 years to build 41,000 miles of the interstate highway system that made it quicker and easier to drive to Vegas. This was the largest public works project in the country to that point.
Las Vegas was perfectly positioned to cash in on the post-war consumerist prosperity boom. I mean, think about it. 1950s, the rise of the national highway system, the emergence of motoring as a leisure activity, and money. It's okay to have fun. It's okay to seek leisure. It's okay to go on frivolous vacations, and it's okay to push the edge.
about a USA.
Number 4, Bugsy Siegel. Their professors admit that the Flamingo and the Las Vegas Strip were not Bugsy's ideas, but he took the Flamingo to the next level of luxury, including requiring the dealers to wear tuxedos. And it is widely believed that the murder of Bugsy Siegel in 1947 did more to attract tourists to Las Vegas than anything else to that point, because people wanted to know what this new luxury Flamingo and Las Vegas was really like.
After Bugsy Siegel is murdered, the national press has stories about Siegel, and every story has him linked to Las Vegas.
Bugsy was singularly unsuccessful until he died. And I think people came to Las Vegas to see what this guy created, what had gotten him in so much trouble that his business associates had eliminated him.
Number 5, the Kefauver Committee, which was held by freshman Tennessee Senator Estes Kefauver and went from 1950 to 1951. The hearings across the country investigated organized crime in interstate commerce, and the hearings were watched by an estimated 30 million Americans in March 1951. 72% of all Americans knew about the hearings, and schools dismissed students to watch the proceedings. The committee exposed the mob and how much they were involved in gambling across the country. Never before had the attention of the nation been riveted so completely on a single matter.
In a setting reminiscent of a Hollywood production, the Senate Crime Committee, headed by Senator Kefauver, Senators Tobey and O'Connor, and Attorney Halley, becomes the sensation of the country.
The committee questioned Bugsy Siegel's girlfriend, Virginia Hill, who was known as the Mob Queen.
The hearing room in New York's federal court building is crowded when Virginia Hill Hauser, the fabulous sweetheart of the slain Bugsy Siegel, notorious underworld figure, answers her subpoena, unfolding in blandest manner revelations that set the nation wondering.
Did you ever get any money from any other person whom we might call a gangster other than Siegel?
No.
Did you ever get any money from Costello?
No.
And did you ever get any money from Meyer Lansky?
I never got money from any of those fellas.
None of those
None
fellas?
of those fellas. None of these that I've been reading about, and none that I knew. They never gave me anything.
None of the Fichettes?
No.
You
I
think-
don't even speak to the... I mean, I met that Charlie once or twice. I don't even talk to him.
You don't like him?
No.
Do you still bet the horse races?
That's the only thing now?
Uh-huh.
I don't bet anything. Now I'm afraid I'll win, and then they'll say I made more money than I did.
You mean you just don't want to win anymore?
I don't want any more.
The dramatic testimony of New York mob boss Frank Costello was fascinating to the public. Twice, Costello left the witness table without being dismissed and served some jail time for contempt of Congress.
The crime hearing's biggest sensation comes from Frank Costello. Reputed king of the underworld, he provides a startling bit of dramatic reality.
Mr. Costello, did you hear the testimony of Mr. Francis McLaughlin yesterday?
No, the defense is...
Mr. Halley, all due respect for the Senate, which I have an awful lot of respect for, I'm not going to answer another question. You just says I'm not under arrest and I'm going to walk out.
Now, I should explain to you exactly what the legal situation is. You are under subpoena, and if, as I assume, the chairman instructs you to remain and answer questions, you will thereby become guilty of contempt of this Senate committee.
Just a minute, Mr. Wolf. Just a minute, Mr. Costello.
You don't mean that,
We'll use every resource in our command to see that he's brought to contempt and that he's arrested by the United States Senate.
Action worthy of Gromyko. The alleged crime king dares the nation's highest elected body to do its worst. The Kefauver Crime Committee meets the press in Washington.
Organized crime does operate on a syndicated basis across state lines in the United States. That is a much bigger, more sinister, and a larger operation than we had ever suspected.
His intention was to drive these scoundrels underground, to put a little light on them and watch them scatter. Well, some of them did scatter. They scattered from the east and from the south, and they came out to Las Vegas.
He created a gangster diaspora. All of a sudden, gangsters, illegal gamblers from bingo parlors and roulette dens, they had nowhere to go. They were feeling the heat. Meyer Lansky and Bugsy Siegel had already gotten a foothold here. Mo Dalitz was already here. And they said, you know what, we're going to Las Vegas. So really, it was the organized drive to push gambling out of American life that created the biggest gambling center in the world.
The Kefauver Committee found that the licensing system which is in effect in Nevada has not resulted in excluding the undesirables from the state.
And pressure was building to crack down on the state.
The essence of the message was either do a better job in Nevada or the federal government will do it for you.
A lot of people who settled here had a real frontier mentality. So that attitude of don't regulate me, don't tell me what to do, don't fence me in, especially if you're the federal government, still prevails today.
The gaming industry in 1959 generated about 22% of the state's taxes. It directly employed thousands of Nevadans. Potential moves by the federal government against the gaming industry posed a serious threat to Nevada's future. Number 6. Nevada Gaming Control. In 1955, 4 years after the Kefauver Committee, Nevada created the Gaming Control Board, and in 1959, the Nevada Gaming Commission was created, which is the enforcement division of the Gaming Control Board. Nevada Governor Grant Sawyer really wanted to get rid of the mob.
He said to the first Nevada Gaming Commission, if there are any hoodlums here, get them out. If they are not here, keep them out. I want you to hang tough.
The 1959 Gaming Control Act said that the Commission shall have full and absolute power and authority to limit, condition, revoke, or suspend any license for any cause deemed reasonable. But these changes were not welcomed by all. Gary Elliott said, "What we have come to accept as normal gaming control apparatus was at one point quite controversial." Number 7. List of excluded persons, or Black Book. Regulators even moved to regulate the patron side of the gaming table by drafting a list of persons whose mere presence in a Nevada casino was deemed deleterious to the industry's reputation. On February 20th, 1960, the Nevada Gaming Commission adopted a regulation that said, establishments wherein gaming is conducted shall be operated in a manner suitable to protect the public health, safety, morals, good order, and general welfare of the inhabitants of the state of Nevada. Paragraph 3 says that casino operators can lose their gaming license for catering to, assisting, employing, or associating with, either socially or in business affairs, persons of notorious or unsavory reputation, or who have extensive police records. In March 1960, the list of excluded persons, or Black Book, was created, and there were 11 men on the initial list that included their name, photograph, description, and other identifying information.
You don't have to be convicted of a crime. You can be put into the book on hearsay, on evidence that would never be admissible in a court of law.
Those suspected of mob ties, but already licensed, were not banned from casinos, including Cleveland mob boss Mo Dalitz, who owned the Desert Inn. While the FBI concluded in 1964 that Dalitz had long been one of the top hoodlums directing Las Vegas operations, Mo was a good citizen, a man who invested in the town. The man behind the Desert Inn was the individual most responsible for the success of the Las Vegas Strip in the 1950s. The Black Book, with a letter dated March 29, 1960, was sent to every large casino in Las Vegas and around the state, with a letter requesting that casinos cooperate in banning all individuals who are on the excluded list. Black Book members Louis Dragna and Marshall Kefauver sued Nevada in federal court, saying, among other things, that the Black Book denied them their rights to due process as guaranteed by the 14th Amendment because there was no hearing before they were put in the Black Book. In 1966, the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Ninth Circuit ruled in Marshall v. Sawyer that persons who have an extensive police record are to be excluded from establishments which operate gambling casinos. Under the indicated circumstances, the due process claim is without substance and involves, at most, a technical violation which warrants neither an award of damages nor vindication in a court of equity. For the reasons indicated and subject to the limitations stated, we hold that Marshall's claim, based upon the failure to accord him an evidentiary hearing, provides no basis for relief under the Due Process Clause. But the federal court warned the state that they should have hearings before placing people on the list, which Nevada started doing. In 1967, the United States Supreme Court refused to review the Marshall case, and that is why 1967 is the year the professors chose for the Black Book, even though it was first made public in 1960.
The United States Supreme Court says, in effect, gambling is a privilege, it's not a right, and if they see it fit to this privileged industry to bar people from entering casinos, they have a right to do it.
Marshall Kefauver was eventually removed from the excluded list after his death. In fact, no one whose name has gone into the Black Book has lived to see it removed.
In a place often called Sin City, Frankie's sins have been deemed so unforgivable that under state law he is forbidden from entering any of the casinos. His name is in the Vegas Black Book. If you're in the Black Book,
you're dead. You mean nothing. They got no sympathy for you.
If your name is in the Black Book, more formally known as the excluded list, life in Vegas is no life at all.
It would be very hard to live in Las Vegas or in Nevada and be on an excluded list.
In a town where the economy is powered by casinos, being blacklisted means Frankie can't work there, can't play there, he can't even meet friends for dinner there. If this city doesn't want you, why do you stay?
Because I've never run from anything in my life, and I'm not going to run from them.
Frankie's name went in 1990 after he served a 2-year prison sentence for his role in a loan shark and bookmaking operation. He served his time, but 23 years later, his name is still in the Black Book. What do you think now, looking at that skyline? Skyline that you're not welcome in.
It hurts me. It hurts me deeply.
And now this changed man is campaigning to get his name out of the Black Book. Citro is determined to stay alive until he does get off the list. He may just be tough enough to do that.
When I die, if I'm not out of that book, I'm coming back to haunt all these bastards.
Number 8, Nevada Corporate Gaming Act. By the late 1960s, gaming taxes were the major source of funding the state budget. Nevada relied heavily on the casino industry, and in the late 1960s, the state wanted to replace the mob with corporate America. Passage of the Corporate Gaming Act of 1967 and a controversial 1969 bill eventually prompted several large and respected companies to begin buying and building hotel casinos. Investments in casino properties soared after passage of the 1969 law. Prior to 1969, all casino owners had to go through a background check and be licensed by the state. For public companies, that would mean that every shareholder would have to go through a background check, which isn't feasible. In 1963 and 1965, the Corporate Gaming Act was initially defeated because there was a fear that mobsters would get behind public companies. But after Howard Hughes started buying casinos, that fear went away, and people started to believe that large corporations could own casinos without the mob involved.
Howard Hughes left Las Vegas for good in 1970, leaving behind a legacy of corporate money. In his wake, international hotel chains moved in, erecting larger versions of their typical buildings.
Las Vegas's architecture and design was about to explode with the flow of funding this provided. Everyone added a tower, and if they already had one, a second. The era of themed design was about to explode.
By the mid-1970s, the Nevada Gaming Control Board began penalizing and refusing gambling license applications to known mobsters. By the early 1980s, the mobsters had mostly disappeared from the city's radar. In 1989, Steve Wynn built the Mirage, which was the beginning of the modern era of casino construction in Las Vegas. Number 9, New Hampshire legalized state lottery. New Hampshire was the first state to legalize a state lottery, which was initially called the New Hampshire Sweepstakes, and results were based on a horse race. Lucky ticket holders were randomly assigned 2 horse races by a drawing. On September 14, 1964, the first sweepstakes horse race was broadcast on ABC's Wide World of Sports. For the first lottery, it took 6 months from the first ticket purchased until the results were known at the horse race. The first state lottery led to state lotteries all over the country, and it gave people the opportunity to try a form of gambling without traveling to Las Vegas. Number 10, Atlantic City legalized gambling. In 1974, New Jersey voters overwhelmingly defeated a referendum to permit state-run gambling casinos all over the state. But in 1976, the second referendum limited legal gambling to the city of Atlantic City, and the casinos would be privately owned, and this referendum was approved by voters. 1.5 million were in favor, while 1.14 million opposed. Atlantic City casinos were to be located halfway between London and Las Vegas in style as well as geography. Some in Nevada were concerned that Atlantic City could eventually surpass Vegas in gambling revenue because New Jersey is much closer to the largest concentration of people in the country, the Eastern Seaboard. Nevada made it illegal for their gaming licensees to conduct gaming outside of Nevada. But that changed in 1977 because that was ruled unconstitutional. The first Atlantic City casino to open was Resorts International on May 26, 1978, which is now called Resorts Casino Hotel.
In the years since, gambling has spread to scores of reservations, riverboats, and localities. Contrary to original fears, the competition has actually benefited Las Vegas.
As it has grown over the years, Las Vegas has become the place to come. It's the Mecca for gamblers. There are so many other things going on around the country, but basically all that does is whet the appetites for people to come to the Mecca.
Tribal gaming was not included on this list because in 1999 it was too early to tell what impact tribal gaming has had on gaming history. In 2001, 2 years after this list came out, the state started regulating internet-based gambling. Michael Green said, "When better historians conduct the next survey, they and other items may make the list." According to a panel of experts and 2 history professors in 1999, these are the top 10 most important events in United States gaming history that allowed Las Vegas to become not just a gambling mecca, but the entertainment capital of the world.